I got set up as quickly as possible following this epic clash. Penn State outlasts Michigan 43-40 in 4 overtimes. Mark Rogers TV and Pro Football Central to run this one down and catch our breath and run through our notes. So this is not going to be eloquent or pretty or organized or anything else. But as I typically do, I took a ton of notes on this football game. Actually was out for about the first half to 3 quarters, DVR'd the game. I was out with my daughter and came back and caught up with the action in the second overtime. And all I could say on Twitter was, wow. Okay, Bill Belton, the junior, 27 carries, 86 yards, obviously gave the Penn State running back a bit of a burst. That's only 3.2 yards per carry, but gave them something for the Michigan defense to have to respect. Belton gave some additional speed, some additional size, and burst out of the backfield, and he scored the game-winning touchdown. He only had 13 attempts last week against Kent State. That was a career high, 43 all season coming in. So Bill Belton, one of the players of the games for Penn State in winning in overtime again, 43-40. And this is a Nittany Lion club that went to Indiana, of all places, last week and lost by 20. So if you saw my predictions on this game, I had Michigan as a confidence pick -1.5, and I truly believe that the Wolverines are a better team, but anything can happen on a college football Saturday, especially on the road. Michigan, of course, could have won it with a Jake Gibbons field goal in overtime. He came in 4 of 5 on the season, but missed 3 kicks in this game. He was 16 of 18 last season. Gibbons, one of the better field goal kickers in college football last season, but struggling on this day, missed the chip shot 33-yarder that would have given Michigan the win in the third overtime, but he missed. It gave Penn State new life. Michigan did make the field goal. Gibbons did convert the second time, but of course it opened the floodgates for Penn State to grasp the opportunity to score the touchdown. They got the pass interference call on Allen Robinson in the end zone. Robinson, who I consider to be the best wide receiver in the Big Ten, had a couple drops there. He could have caught that football, and certainly the play before, the corner route against Blake Countess, should have caught that football. It went right through his hands. But again, Allen Robinson with tight coverage there. And the pass interference against Michigan sets up the winning touchdown by Belton. A couple plays previous to that, in that same overtime, after Michigan had scored to lead 40-37. What does Bill O'Brien have to play for anyway? He's not playing for postseason play or for a championship. Why not go for it when you've got it right there and it's about a 90% play to go for it, 4th and inches? And he did. And he ran the ball to Belton on the right side, and Belton was actually, it was a slow developing play, and actually there was penetration in the backfield, so he was back about 2 to 3 yards, and then he found a crease and dove through for the first down. So that was huge, obviously converted, or the game would have been over. So Michigan had a couple opportunities to win the game in overtime, but had their biggest opportunity after putting together a near perfect second half, losing 21-10 at halftime. Michigan outscored Penn State 24-3. So I blame the kicker, Gibbons, in overtime to a certain extent. I blame the play calling down the stretch for Michigan. With that 34-24 and then 34-27 lead, Michigan moved the ball down the field. Gardner was making plays with his feet. He was making plays with his arm. They did put the ball in Gardner's hands to win the game, even with a 7-point lead, not trying to protect the ball too much until they got close to field goal range. Then they got very, very conservative, too conservative, could have put the game out of reach with the field goal. But they got backed up, 4th and 15, 4th and 17 on the punt. The punt was too far, kicked into the end zone, set up Penn State despite no timeouts, despite playing in a difficult situation in regards to not having much time. I believe about 55 seconds left on the clock at that point. Christian Hackenberg, who at times looks like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, delivering the football. You can see what the scouts saw in him and the recruiting coordinators saw in him in bringing him into Penn State, why he was the number 1 or number 2 recruited and rated quarterback coming out of high school football. He can deliver it At the same time, he made some crucial mistakes. But on this final drive, this has to be Christian Hackenberg's moment of date, to date, in rallying his team against Michigan and performing very well on that final drive. Hackenberg, 23 of 44, 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. So we certainly saw the good and we saw the bad. Fortunately for O'Brien and Penn State and Hackenberg, we saw the very good when it mattered in overtime, but especially on that final drive of regulation when it had to happen. And of course, Allen Robinson made that clutch play, even though I diss him for the 2 drops in overtime that really could have cost the Nittany Lions. He made the great play over the defender, hauling in the football at the half-yard line to set up the tying score. Michigan could not run in this football game. This is a running game that really hampered Michigan down the stretch last season, although I thought this was a very quality football team at the end of last year in taking Ohio State and South Carolina to the brink. They could not run the football out of the running back position. The quarterback can, Denard Robinson, then Gardner, and Gardner this season. But Fitz Toussaint, have you ever seen a line like this for a running back? 27 carries, 27 yards. Okay, obviously didn't get the blocking. He's not that bad of a back. He's not a feature back. He's not an exceptional back, but he's a quality back. Couple things contributed to that as well. The blocking was horrendous, obviously. And then also late in the game, obviously, Michigan was protecting a 10-point lead, then a 7-point lead. And so they really keyed on the running game, knowing that Michigan was going to try to chew up the clock. So that contributed to the stats, but funny rush line for Fitz Toussaint in this one, 27 carries, 27 yards. Eric Magnuson, who was the 27th rated tackle coming out of high school football, according to ESPNU, had to fill in for Taylor Lewan, who's considered probably the best left tackle in college football, could have moved on to the NFL, been drafted in the top 10, decided to come back to Michigan. Lewan left with 5 minutes left in the second quarter. They moved Schofield from right tackle over to left tackle and then brought in the freshman Magnuson. So obviously that hurt in pass protection. So we saw Gardner blindsided a few times and also could not run the football. Kalis, another highly recruited offensive lineman from Michigan, with an unsportsmanlike late hit, pushed a 3rd and 1 to a 3rd and 16 with Michigan at midfield. That was somewhat key at that point, even though Michigan later came back to take the lead. Frank Clark got this thing going for the Wolverines in the second half with the big interception, or the fumble recovery, off Zach Zwinick, who's been the 1,000-yard rusher for Penn State going back to last season, who was taken off the field most of the second half after that fumble and the ball given to Belton. Frank Clark picked it up after the huge hit and stripped by James Ross, made a very heady play in the hole, knocked the ball free, and Michigan got back in the game after trailing by 11 at halftime, cut it to 21-17. Offensive line issues all season for this Michigan offense, and now Taylor Lewan, again, probably the best in the biz. We don't know the severity of that injury. They had to shuffle the offensive line against Minnesota despite winning that game and pulling away late. Hackenberg looking for the tight end. They took away, Michigan did, Allen Robinson early in the game. Hackenberg was looking for his tight ends, and he's just hit or miss at this point. And we'll see if this is impetus. This final drive, this clutch drive by Hackenberg against Michigan, going 80 yards, and then the overtime performance by Hackenberg in pulling out this huge win, if this is impetus for a big second half out of the young freshman, because he's been up and down, and he certainly showed it in this game. He threw some awful passes. He was way off at times, made some bad decisions, but you can see it when he delivers the ball. It looks great, and he can sure hum it, and he can throw it in tight windows. And it was, as was mentioned on the broadcast a number of times, has just tremendous confidence. Gardner looked bad early through the 2 picks. And made some poor decisions and was kind of scattershot, but he really pulled himself together, and he was the Michigan offense. He was the Michigan rushing offense for sure. Ran it for 121 yards, and that includes the sacks. So he legitimately ran for 150 yards on the ground. 15 of 28 through the air again. Got off to a horrible start and then really pulled through and played well. 240 yards passing for Gardner, so he made big plays in the passing game when you complete 15 for 240, 3 touchdowns, and the 2 picks that we mentioned, coming off his first ever no turnover game against Minnesota in the Wolverines 42-13 win there. But he goes back to turning over the football a couple times in the first half. But again, Gardner was awesome, was exceptional in this game for Michigan. Maybe not the best quarterback in the Big Ten, but he's certainly in the mix, and we will see what he has coming back later this season. Michigan, they probably should have lost to Akron. They probably should have lost to UConn. So did we see this coming? Maybe not this week, but certainly at some point. Michigan goes to Penn State, falls behind, makes a great comeback, dominates the second half. Then the play calling getting too conservative within field goal range. And so Michigan drops this one to Penn State when the kicker misses Jake Gibbons in overtime, and Penn State wins this one. A huge win coming off the disappointing effort at Indiana. Michigan falls to 5-1 and most likely out of the national championship race, even though their number 19 ranking would indicate that they were never in the championship race, but certainly a team of Michigan's tradition and prestige at 5-0. I consider them gunning for a national championship, but there's still the Big Ten to be won, certainly. Okay, Penn State and Michigan fans. Both sides of the spectrum here in regards to emotions, certainly. The highs and the lows. The lows are the lows for Michigan fans in dropping to 5-1. Would love to hear from you and your opinion, your perspective on this football game and what's upcoming for both Michigan football and Penn State right here on Mark Rogers TV and ProFootballCentral.com.